Good afternoon and welcome once again to this 6-day program in which we are discussing not just BRICS but various facets of relations between and among countries of the BRICS, which of course include India and Russia, but which also include other countries and most importantly, China. China, as you know, is the largest economy in the BRICS, not just largest economy. The size of Chinese GDP exceeds the combined GDP of all the other BRICS countries. So, and for us Indians, China has been a major factor in our external relations in the last 75 years. One can even say that some of the major shifts in international relations have been on account of changing dynamics of relations between China and the two superpowers of the Cold War period. All right, so we know how during 1960s the Sino-Soviet split happened, followed by the rapprochement between US and China in early 1970s, and which had a major impact on the global politics of that period. Some would say that this combination finally led to the decreasing role of Soviet Union and finally the end of the Soviet Union. Of course, that had nothing to do with US-China rapprochement, but that was a very momentous event. And similarly, for India, China's relations with the other two great powers, superpowers, has been very critical. And China has been a major factor. The Sino-Soviet split also occurred at a time when relations between India and Soviet Union were improving, and when the Sino-Soviet relations were at the lowest ebb, that was in 1969, when there was a violent clash along the Ussuri River. That period also marked the high point of Indo-Soviet relations and leading to the August 1971 Indo-Soviet Treaty. So that means China has been critical, and in the last few years, China's economic and military and global profile and its technological prowess, you have heard about some of the developments in last few days, have gone to show that this is one country that is most critical in the decades to come. So today we have someone who would be discussing Russia-China relations. Maybe it will be focused more on trade and economic cooperation, but its implication for geopolitics and regional balance of power cannot be overemphasized. So I invite Professor Nikulin, and after yesterday's excellent presentation and discussion, I'm sure we are going to have another round of interesting deliberation.
Thank you again, dear colleagues. We continue our course. And today the topic of our lecture is, you see, economic development and change in BRICS, analyzing Russian-Chinese relations. My lecture consists of from three parts. First, some economic description of China among other BRICS countries. Second, I'm not politologist, but I'll try to give some my own view on the development of political relations between China and Russia in historical context. And The third part of our lecture, it's my own experience as a field researcher from Chinese countryside and some comparison between the development Russian countryside and the Chinese countryside. So first part it's economics, second part it's politology, and third some field research from rural sociology. So, some main characteristics of China. China's economy is the largest among all BRIC countries, and with fantastic GDP growth during past three decades. General information, you see area of China is 9.6 million kilometers squares. Population, now China in the second place in the world. 5 or 7 years it was China had the first place. And some characteristic GDP of China. This is the dynamics of growth of Chinese GDP past 5 years. And also some main characteristics of China GDP in 2022. So you see the meaning of industry, first of all, and actually all branches of China's economy now are really well developed. Machinery and transport equipment form the basis of China's foreign trade. Just a minute. And sometimes China of 21st century is analog of British Empire in 19th century. I mean, in the meaning of industrial development, and it's also the share of industrial products from China in 21st century is compatible with the features, the characteristics of British Empire in 19th century. You see structure of export from China in 2022. The meaning of machinery and transport equipment and other industrial goods, and also structure of import to China in 2022. Also, China imported a lot of machinery, newest technologies, and structure of export-import of China gives some broad context of development, powerful China's economy. So again, almost half of all exported products from China are machinery and transport equipment, and the main importers of goods from China are the United States, Hong Kong, and Japan. Concerning structure of imports, about 20% of China's imported products are mineral fuels, which are the main raw materials for maintaining industrial production in the country. The main exporters of goods to China are South Korea, Japan, and the United States. Look at the share of BRICS countries in China's foreign trade. After the entry of new members, you see that on the first and second position, Brazil and Russia. So the meaning of India is also has high potential, and BRICS countries in structure of export, the share of BRICS countries is about 12%, and in import about 15%. Of course, it exists some specialization in export-import relations between different BRICS countries and China. Concerning Brazil, maybe you know this global soya pork belt between Brazil and China. So Brazil is biggest producer of soya, and most of the soy products it's for feeding of Chinese pork. So China imported a lot of especially food products, and especially soya from Brazil. Concerning Russian relations, we will see a special slide. Sorry. So more than 50% of China's export to Russia are machinery and transport equipment. You see dynamics of China's exports to Russia last years. So it's the growth of this export, and also some analysis export structure in 2022. Mostly again it's transport equipment, chemical and rail products. After 2022 it was, if you want, some sort of car revolution in among Russian cities. I think more than 60% now of all cars in Moscow it's Chinese car, and sometimes of course it's European brand like Peugeot, like Volkswagen or other brands, but that the cars were produced in China. Concerning the export largest industries from China to Russia in 2002, you see again not only cars, but also another form of transport, electric equipment, IT technologies, mechanical equipment, and so on and so on. It's products of export from China to Russia in 2022. Of course, a lot of textile materials. China's import of raw materials from Russia is key factor in bilateral trade between the countries. And you see import structure in 2022. First of all, it's of course mineral products, gas, oil, different metals like iron, nickel, aluminum, ferrous metals, copper, and so on and so on. So, and a lot of wood, especially from Siberia. I can mention also about electric power of hydropower power station in Siberia from Russia to China to China industry. China also active participant and one of the main founders of National Bank of Development for BRICS countries, and you see special programs for China that were supported by this bank. So it's various projects in the field of sustainable development and transport infrastructure. The main direction for China support, you see three names of the project: Guangzhou Urban Transportation Improvement Project, and the project goal improving the connectivity and accessibility of key industrial zone in Guangzhou and promoting the city socio-economic development. Next project, transport infrastructure, is Guangxi Trunk Road Network Improvement Program, expanding accessibility by building critical missing roads connecting cities, ports, and remote areas, and enhancing the potential for long-term sustainable development of the sector. And the third direction, sustainable development, project name Liaoning Province Sustainable Urban Development Project, especially ecology. restoring rivers and protecting the environment, as well as reducing flooding in the province's cities. You see the accent for China, again, the reconstruction of newest transport infrastructures, very ambitious project of a new road, a new railway station, new giant bridges, and so on and so on and so on. So it's also very ambitious picture of modernization, again, China's economy and China's engineering infrastructure. So its main key factors of China's economy in context BRICS development and interrelations between China's economy and Russian economy. Just a moment. Let's talk about some political relation, especially between Russia and China. You see this map with the longest borders between countries. And pay attention also the long borderline between Russia and China. This border was historically established in not this, but approximately in this region since 16th, 17th centuries, about 4-5 years ago, when Russian Cossacks, it's some combination between peasants and warrior, and they reached the far east land, and they visited borders of China Empire. So it was first contact between Russian Tsardom and Emperor of China. The history of contacts, political contacts, border contacts between Russia and China had a long history. Sometimes it was history of alliance, sometimes it was history of enemies. And a long period during two centuries, 16th century, 17th centuries, 18th centuries, it was relatively peaceful coexistence to empires. But in 19th century, it was period of strange interrelations between Russian Empire and China. We know that since the 19th century, China has a lot of political troubles inside country, and also invasions some European countries, first of all British Empire, France, and also from North Russia to the territory of China. And it was period of strong conflicts between European states and China. Concerning interrelations between China and Russia, it's possible to say that China and Russia tried to be alliance in period of 19th century against British Empire. But of course, Russia had own geostrategic interests, and for example, in historical period, you know, this part of territory was controlled by China, this line of River Amur, and China worried in the second half of the century that River Amur may be the road for penetrating British fleet from north to China. And Russia suggested in this case to protect China, to save this territory and include this territory in as a part of Russian Empire. As a result, it was so-called Aigun treatment. Small Aigun town was in the River Amur. When, as a result, now it's part of Russia. But in 19th century, this territory was China's territory, and China decided that maybe it's better that this territory will be under control of Russia to protect China from north against invasion of British Empire. But in the beginning of 20th century, now between 19th and 20th century, it was military conflict between main European states and China. It was special military expedition of France, Great Britain, Russia to Beijing. And as a result of this invasion, Russian imperialism tried also to control north part of China, and this province Manchuria. Manchuria is a very large province on the north of China. As a result, Russia had own fortress, so-called Port Arthur fortress, and it was Port Arthur has very strong military meaning for Russian fleet, because this port was possible use all year. More north ports on the Russian territory were not possible to use because of ice in the winter. In 1904, 1905, it was the war between Russia and Japan and the North Territory of China. China was some neutral state that observed this conflict on their own territory. Russian army was defeated, the Port Arthur and also Manchuria was lost, and this territory was under control Japan and Japanese army. It was formed special separate state, so-called Manchukuo, in 1920s, 1930s, and this territory was also the territory of permanent conflict between China, Soviet Union, and Japan, between the First World War and the Second World War. After ending of civil war in Russia, so many so-called white immigrants decided to live in China, and one of the epicenter of Russian immigration in 1920s, 1930s was biggest Chinese city at that time in the north of China, Harbin. So Russian immigration had four main cities after ending of civil war in Russia, and you know, they lived prefer some also their political ideological directions. For example, in Berlin were so-called bourgeois immigrants from Russia. In Paris, that was so-called monarchist immigrants, and in Prague were representative of socialist parties, but not Bolshevik parties, maybe, you know, so-called socialist revolutionaries or Mensheviks. And this fourth part of Russian immigrants lived in Harbin, and Harbin was epicenter of ideology of Евразийство, Eurasian ideologist, and the main brilliant thinker of this direction lived in Harbin in 1920s, in 1930s. That period, I mean 1920s, 1930s, was period of great troubles for China. It was a period of some permanent civil war between different militarist groups in China, and also the period of expansion of Japan on territory China. It was also big game between Comintern that tried to push China on some proletarian or peasant rebellion against world imperialism, against British imperialism. And we know that that period China was split between also two political power of Communist Party of China and so-called Kuomintang bourgeois parties in China. And both Chinese side, communist and Kuomintang, sometimes were enemies, sometimes they struggle against Japanese invasion in 1930s. Soviet Union strongly supported Chinese communists and Kuomintang against Japanese invasion, because of Soviet Union also worried about big war between Japan and Russia in 1930s. After that was started the Second World War. Finally, Japan was defeated. After 1945, it was continuing of civil war in China. As a result, communist won, and Chiang Kai-shek migrated on Taiwan island. And it was period of so-called great friendship between two communist countries, and many Russians and many Chinese reminded with nostalgia this gold era of 1950s in interrelation two countries. Soviet Union supported strongly the development of new China socialist country. A lot of engineers, different specialists maintain the development of Chinese economy and Chinese society, and so many Chinese students were students of best Russian universities in 1950s years. Sometimes in policy, like in private life, we had the problems, personal conflict between leaders, and in the second half of 20th century, it was typical situation of this personal conflict between Nikita Khrushchev and Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was shocked with this report of Khrushchev and 20th century 20th Party Communist report about Stalin and Stalinism. Mao was against this description of Stalinism and Stalin policy, and after that, during few years, in the end of 1950s, in the beginning of 1960s, the relations between both countries were actually destroyed, and in period of 1960s, it was era of a Cold War between two countries, and sometimes not only Cold War. In the end of 1960s, it was a real military conflict on Damansky Island. Damansky Island is small island on the Amur River, and both countries tried to control this small island. As a result, it was some mini war between China and the Soviet Union. And during again in 1960s, 1970s, it was a period of very bad relations between China and Soviet Union. China insisted that Soviet Union is not a real socialist state, and now it's the country of so-called bourgeois revisionism and Soviet hegemonism, and the Soviet Union criticized strongly Maoist China for radical leftist ideology, and both countries tried to be leaders of world communist movement. And by the way, also in this period, in the beginning of 1970s, it was period of re-establishing new political relations between China and the United States. President Nixon visited Mao in the beginning of 1970s, and it started a new era interrelations between United States and communist China. Concerning the economic development in period of Maoist China, yes, it was sometimes it was rapid growth of economy, but these strong contradictions. And for example, Mao tried to copy the model of Stalinist collectivization, and in that period it was organized a lot of so-called peasant commune in China, and the result of this collectivization was in a whole bad. So as a result of Stalinist collectivization was strong famine in the beginning of 1930s. Also in the beginning of 1960s, it was awful disaster in China countryside because of this rapid growth of so-called peasant communes. After death of Mao Zedong, new leader of China, Deng Xiaoping, changed the political and economical course of China. Deng Xiaoping was a young scholar in our academy in 1920s, and he observed the political discussion between communist leader in Soviet Russia in 1920s, and for himself he preferred so-called Bukharin course for development of so-called new economic policy, and thought skeptically about Stalinist course concerning this forced industrialization. So when he kept power, he decided to return to some ideas of theory of new economic policy of 1920s. So its idea of course, strong state control, so-called, and with a strong sector of industry, but also the combination of different forms of economy, so-called mixed economy, introduction of some elements of free market, and especially freedom for peasant economy. So the experiment with peasant commune was stopped, and Chinese peasant finally have freedom to produce and to sell their products on the local markets of China. It was very clever and successful policy during 1980s, and China is gradually open own economy, own productive forces for global world market. In that period, China organized so-called free zones for international trade, especially on this coastline, and the epicenter of this trade was Shanghai, and also a lot of powerful and rich China cities. And after that, we can see this the story of successful growth of Chinese economy last for decades. It was very interesting question for political elites, China and Russia, the phenomenon of collapse of Soviet Union. And also a lot of Chinese analytics wrote special reports, papers about this phenomenon. And from China point of view, the Soviet Union, Communist Party of Soviet Union, made a lot of mistakes. First of all, the main problem for China, like for Soviet Union, it was the problem of federalization. China copied a lot of from Soviet experience, but also some political autonomies in China, and we know now it's also some problem for China, so-called Tibet region and Xinjiang region. So, as a result analysis that it was the growth of nationalist contradictions in the late of period of the Soviet Union. The second, it's bad situation with oil prices for Soviet Union, because the oil prices were so low in that period, so that Soviet Union was not able to make decisive steps for restructuring their economy. Also, reform started not from agriculture like it was in China, but from some new financial operation with privatization of key branches of Soviet economy. And of course, it was the problem of so-called degradation of old political elites in the Soviet Union, and especially split conflict between Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin in this crisis situation in the end of 1980s, in the beginning of 1990s. So this combination of factors was the result of collapse of Soviet Union, and China tried to avoid typical mistakes of Soviet Union in period perestroika. So it was gradual, step-by-step experiment how to open former central planned Chinese economy to global market. It was reform started from transformation of agriculture, and only after that reforms in industry. And of course, its idea that the Communist Party has to be union without any splits and internal conflicts. And also from Russian side, sometimes some Russian analytics asked why Deng Xiaoping was able to organize Chinese perestroika and Mikhail Gorbachev was not able to organize this perestroika. Why Chinese NEP was successful and why Gorbachev NEP was not successful. One of the answers on this question, in 1980s, the social structure of Chinese society was the same with social structure of Soviet Russia in 1920s. I mean that about more than 80% of Chinese society and Soviet society in China in 1980s and in Soviet Russia in 1920s, more than 80% were peasants. But when Gorbachev started their own perestroika in the end of 1980s, Russia was really industrial society, and the share of rural population was about only 30%, and this rural population was not peasant. They were another type of, most of them were rural workers, and so on and so on. So it was not possible to exploit peasantry for reforms. So Gorbachev didn't have this social structure, especially in countryside, like it was in period of Soviet NEP or Chinese Deng Xiaoping policy. So it's one of the answer of this question. Concerning relations between both countries, yes, in post-Maoist era, it was established good relations between China and post-Soviet Russia, and we can see the growth of trade between both countries, and we can mention something that, you know, in the period of 1950s, in the period of this Soviet communist friendship between Russia and China, it was metaphor that Soviet Union, the old brother of China, and China is young brother of Soviet Union. Sometimes in 21st century the picture is changed, and sometimes China now is old brother for post-Soviet Russia, and post-Soviet Russia in economic sense, in political sense, sometimes play a role of young brother, of big brother, big China brother, something like that. Of course, now interrelations between both countries are very warm. A lot of students from China are students in our country. I think that China's tourists, the most of tourists now in my country, they Chinese tourists, and especially in St. Petersburg. By the way, I visited 2 times last time St. Petersburg before COVID, and it was not so easy for Russian citizens to visit own Russian museum, because so huge tourist delegation from China occupied Hermitage, Tsar palaces, and so on and so on. Of course, both countries has some alliance obligation in this world. They try to maintain each other in their regional conflicts, and both countries, again, if we return to social structures of our countries, has this also new contradictions of development of interrelations between city and countryside. I'll show you the picture of this evolution social structure of Chinese society. Oh, but again, about similarities with Russia. We remember previous lecture that we have well-developed European part of Russia and small-developed Asian part of Russia. We can see the same characteristics between Russia and China. For example, this well-developed rural regions of China, but absolutely empty west part of China, because it's the territory of mountains, the territory of steppes and deserts, so only some oases of agriculture in Xinjiang. And China also has these contradictions between 2 parts of own country. Well-developed one, east part of country, and underdeveloped west part of country. In Russian case, we have opposite situation. Well-developed west part, European part of country, and less developed Asian east part of country. It's picture not only for agriculture. You see, for example, also some demographic characteristics, evolution of Chinese society, and we can see also some problems with North. You remember this map of Russian North, these processes of depopulation, and this is also processes of depopulation on China North. And the growth, the relative growth and concentration of population in prosperous region of China, especially this coastline, growth of population, especially in Islamic republics like in Russia, and moderate growth in the central part of China. And of course, we should remember about this serious policies that practiced during 2 or 3 generations, one family, one child, and result of this policy. And you see here the characteristics of economic development, different regions of China. You see again very rich regions. It's analog, I don't know, some Russian St. Petersburg, Moscow, south of Russia, or some oil Siberia regions, and also underdeveloped regions in depression in other regions of China. Look, this dynamics of rural and urban population in China. It's a real demographic revolution and structural revolution between shares of city residents and rural residents. I mentioned to you when Deng Xiaoping in the end of 1970s, this feature the same with the same feature was in Soviet Russia in the middle of 1920s. So, and during 40 years, rural residents were reduced dramatically from 82% to 36%. And of course, the growth of city population in China during last four decades. The results of this urban-rural revolution in China very complicated, and we observe it on the examples of some my own field experience. I'll give you the picture. I participated 2 years ago in big international conference, Critical Agrarian Studies in 21st Century. This conference was devoted to anniversary of Journal of Peasant Studies. Journal of Peasant Studies is a leading journal in my specialty. This conference was organized on the base of Beijing Agrarian University, and Beijing Agrarian University was established in 1950s in period of Soviet-Chinese friendship, with support, for example, our Moscow Agricultural Academy, Timirezev Academy, and both universities now have very, very warm relations. Here a lot of participants of this conference, prominent professor, full professor from leading universities from Europe, from America, but also a lot of PhD students, not only from China, but also from many countries of Asia, and especially from Africa. When I visited this university, I was very surprised that about, maybe it's really big university, but about 1/3 of students of this university, the students from Africa. So now China developed very ambitious program how to attract students, especially from countries from global south and especially from Africa. Now China has a very ambitious program of development of China's economy, and especially agrarian economy, in many parts of the world, and especially in Africa. And this policy is, I suppose, is relatively successful because good interrelations between government size and villages and rural areas, especially in China. I had opportunity to visit 3 rural regions in China, in different provinces, in the south of China, in the north of China, with my Chinese colleagues, Chinese sociologists. And China now supports strongly the development of village, but China village has a lot of internal problem because of this rapid growth of urban economy, cities economy, because of previous experiments with Chinese commune, with this policy, one family, one child, and the main idea for the main direction for many agrarian universities in China, how to develop effective extinguish services for development of Chinese countryside. I mentioned to you about some contradictions in development of in Russian economy, relatively good results in Russian industry, and the problem of demographic crisis and devastating in many rural regions of Russia. In some cases, we can find the same picture in Chinese countrysides. It's mass exodus, first of all, men's as worker migrants in biggest, largest city of China, and now in many cases Chinese countryside is also zone of old people, women, and children. And Chinese colleagues worked with this problem, and look, for example, some my own field experiment with Chinese colleagues in the north of China. It's not north, it's about 20 kilometers on north from Beijing. It was special rayon Pinggu, municipal district. It's some field of complex works, local municipal power, Beijing Agrarian University, and local communities. You see the landscape. I visited China in the end of November, in the beginning of December, and it's really severe weather. Its temperature was without snow, but about -5 degree. You see the landscape of this district. It's interesting to observe it. You see a lot of work. How to reconstruct a rural landscape. A lot of stones, a lot of newest infrastructure everywhere, not in the city, but in countryside, in villages. So you see typical villages and the streets of this village are empty. Sometimes it's possible to see old dwellers of this village. I asked where are the children in your village. The answer was all of them in the schools and the central school. So now China has also the process of centralization of school. A lot of formal small schools are closed now, and also like in America, in rural areas, special school buses uses for children for a central rural school in China. You see this local municipal office, and it's moment when our car arrived is a local municipality. It's moment of meeting. Of course, everywhere some symbols of the meaning of ruling of Communist Party of China. And you see its local municipality with own plan how to develop this countryside. It's Chinese love some miniature models of the reforms, and for example, these lines, these ideas of new local roads, marshruts, pedestrian roads, especially for tourism. It's expected that tourists from Beijing will visit these picturesque territories, ancient territories, and by the way, this territory has some fragment of Great Wall. If you know, Great Wall was about 2,000 kilometers, and only some fragments now reconstructed, maybe 50 kilometers, especially for tourists. So it's possible to observe some fragments of Great Wall in other parts of China. And this complex program, how to develop some small tourist hotels, special entertainment zone, and so on and so on. And it's also some combinations, this program, between the head of local municipality and the professors from China agrarian universities. For local farmers, it will organize big space, so-called farmer market. It was only constructed, it was not open yet when we visited it, and it's also, you see, Chinese large scale market, especially in countryside, and it's also combination not only local municipality, professor from Beijing University, but also local party secretary. And it's interesting that you can find a lot of special diagrams, photos, special posters about development of any part of this territory. So you see party secretary explained us the local plans for development this territory. So now we are inside our municipal office, and when I was asked, what is this? It's tabloid of airport. No, it's information about local budget. It's some information against corruption, and it's also some local information, statistics concerning the development of this municipality. China has a very powerful, ambitious program of digitalization, all territory of China and also countryside. And I was also very expressed this potential of digitalization as a total control territories and their development. I mentioned about school. I mentioned about kindergarten, for example, here. But school was closed, kindergarten was also closed. Instead school, you see, it was former school. Now it's a special social house for very old dweller. And this PhD student from Chinese agrarian university, the thesis of her PhD dissertation, the great social problem, what to do with old generation in Chinese countryside. It's newest problem. It's strange problem because we know the great tradition of big Chinese family, special interrelations, good interrelations between old and young generation. But now it's a mass problem when young generation migrated in the cities, and old people finally, in many cases now, are visitors of this type of house. And my colleagues described two variants how decide this problem. One variant organize local houses for old dwellers like this, transforming former school to house for old dwellers. Another variant, because you know it's very expensive to reopen on the base of school and kindergarten the houses for oldest people. Another variant to invite old peasant dwellers in special big comfortable houses in big cities. But most of them rejected to move to the cities, prefer to stay in their own villages. You see the interior inside of this house for old rural dwellers. And kindergarten was transferred firstly for country club, for some public events in this village, and also some country hotel, and you see this special room, special space for sociologist. It's sometimes in your field work. It's a central problem where you can stay, where you can sleep. It's of course it's relatively comfortable conditions for rural researchers. Of course, everywhere you can see progress in rural technologies. For example, in this village exists special computing farm for green planting, and it's with using newest technologies. I mentioned that newest technologies needs in many workers. For example, this farm for this farm, it's enough first director of this farm and only one worker on this farm. Again, it's a problem of what to do with working places in the village. Most of population of this village worked in Beijing and other big cities. And this pathway, I mean, we visited and we worked on this way partly. So you see this road, and I was impressed also this special electronic digital machines that control this territory, not in the city but in countryside, and is very interesting apparatus for complicated control of territory. So now you see the new directions of countryside in China, and some similarities between Russian situation, demographic situation in countryside, and also some attempt of the state to control and to develop rural territories in Russia and China. Oh, thank you.
Please,
Yeah.
take a seat. So, thank you very much, Professor Nikulin, for this exhaustive and comprehensive. मैं काम कर रहा? I can speak louder. No, अब आ गया. All right, for this exhaustive and comprehensive account of Russia-China relations, not just relations but also the developments in China in the last 2-3 centuries. You covered a vast canvas starting from the 17th century when Chinese empire was very strong, powerful, 18th century, and by 19th century how there was a decline, and what Chinese consider to be one of the foremost determinants of their mindset, their policies, the Middle Kingdom complex, and where Chinese believe that they are the most civilized, they are literally at the center of the world, and the rest of the world consists of less civilized people, barbarians, who are doomed to be, civilized by China, maybe, or at least should pay tribute to China. That was the mindset when initially the Europeans came to China and they gave small gifts to the Chinese emperor in lieu of some favorable trade agreement. Those small gifts were considered by the Chinese emperor as a tribute from a lesser king, from a vassal, something like that. And by the middle of 19th century, the situation deteriorated so much that what is called, often referred to as the century of humiliation, 1 century from mid-19th to mid-20th century, and finally the 1949 Chinese Revolution and a new communist government. So it's believed that Middle Kingdom complex and century of humiliation, these are two very defining influences on Chinese mindset and its foreign policy. It's also important to know that the various powers which were vying for influence in China in the 19th century, Russia was one. And although China was not formally colonized, but it was carved into spheres of influence. Manchukuo, which Professor Nikulin mentioned, Manchuria, which was created into it was an independent state. Students of international law would know that it only had one thing lacking in complete independent statehood, and that was international recognition. Otherwise, the last emperor of China was Henry Pu, was declared the ruler of this principality, Manchukuo. So China went through very difficult times. 1950s, Professor Nikulin very rightly said, was a time when, after the revolution, the Chinese received massive Soviet support and aid and technicians for industrialization and modernization of China, but this was to last just for a decade. By the end of 1950s, and especially following the 20th Party Congress, Khrushchev's de-Stalinization campaign, Professor Nikulin mentioned only the ideological factor that China was not comfortable with Khrushchev's policy of peaceful coexistence. There were many other issues. For example, peaceful transition to communism. Khrushchev came out with this idea around that time. Kerala got its first communist government in 1957 through parliamentary elections. So there was this notion that perhaps transition to socialism was possible through peaceful and parliamentary methods, but Mao would have none of it. All right, so peaceful coexistence, peaceful transition to socialism, all this was unacceptable, and therefore the ideological divide between China and communist China and Soviet Union began, and the world communist movement was divided. China started accusing Soviet Union of social imperialism. So if US and the West were capitalist imperialist, Soviet Union was accused of being social imperialist. And the situation came to such a, violent end when in 1969 there was war along the Ussuri River. Of course, subsequently, China joined the US, I wouldn't say the side or camp, but they collaborated. Soviet Union became the common enemy, rival. So in US policy of containment of Soviet Union, containment of communism, China became a willing ally by 1972 when Nixon traveled to Peking. And after that, the history is quite well known. Of course, this was to last for next 2, 3, 4 decades. It was during this period that Mao Zedong's policies were discarded, and Deng Xiaoping launched his 4 modernizations, 1978, industry, agriculture, military, and technology. And in the next 40 years, China emerged as what we see as an economic powerhouse, the largest producer in PPP terms. It is already the number 1 global economy. In dollar terms, it is second, but PPP, it's number 1. So China's rise has been, of course, China received help from both the Soviet Union during 1950s, early 60s maybe, and from 1970s onwards, China was a beneficiary of getting access to US and European markets and getting US and Western investment in technology. So China has been basically a beneficiary from both sides. And in the last 10 years, Russia-China relations have acquired a new momentum. Yesterday, I talked how 2014 was in many ways a turning point in our own country. It was because of the change of government. But globally, 2014 was the year when Russia carried out its Crimea campaign, reintegration of Crimea. And that was a turning point also in Russia-China relations, because once Russia came under the sanctions regime, Russia moved closer to China, and the same year, I suppose it was 2014 or May 2015, when the biggest ever trade deal between any two countries in human history, $400 billion energy deal between Russia and China, was signed. So since then, China-Russia relations have not looked back. They have moved from strength to strength. China has already become the major importer of Russian crude, Russian gas, and military equipment, for a change, which was not earlier the case. From 2014 onwards, China has received, and now that they are having regular military exercises in the last 2-3 years since the February 2022 Ukraine war. The frequency of military engagement between China and Russia has increased tremendously. They are now cooperating and collaborating in building new weapon systems, anti-missile systems. All right, so it's a new level, and it is generally believed that this combination, Russia-China combination, is the one which has the capability and the will to challenge US hegemony. Professor Nikulin in detail talked about China's economic progress and journey, and also his own field visit. The slides were very helpful. What you see makes a greater impact than what you read. So we had, I believe, an excellent and very comprehensive, all-encompassing presentation. The house is open for Q&A and discussion. Yes. We start from here.
So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Indeed, a very nice lecture. So, since you have specialization in agricultural studies and agrarian studies, haven't you ever thought to visit India? Because I believe the economy of the rural India, or particularly the Indian economy, or the rural area is quite vast than even China, I believe. So, since it was your first visit, I think, of India, so haven't you ever thought to visit India and to do agrarian studies here, sir?
Yes, it's my first visit, and I dream to visit rural India, some rural regions. Yes, I dream to visit and to see Indian countryside.
Please do that.
But yes,
But maybe during the next visit.
yes.
So, Professor Nikulin, thank you very much. It was really a fantastic presentation. And because most of the students here are political science students, I think, talking about this specific case of Russia-China relations, in case of BRICS, is really fascinating, because most of the time we look at things only in India from Indian perspective, and I'm sure in Russia from Russian perspective. So it's really good to see an alternative perspective about a country whom I think most of us have not visited and looked at it from that perspective. So thank you so much. Now, I am just thinking of a common link which one can establish between your yesterday's presentation and what you're talking today. And there is a phenomena in India also, which you talked about dead villages in Russia. In India, we have a serious problem now called ghost villages, especially in the hilly areas, and in central India also there are many villages where there are only elderly people, or sometimes there are children also who are being taken care by their grandparents. Most of the young people have moved out of villages, or they visit villages during harvesting season or some other season. Now, when you were talking about the Chinese experience and you were talking about the developmental problem in Russia, I was thinking that perhaps one common thing which as members of the BRICS we need to think about is a common model of development for rural areas. I mean, most of the time we look at technological development and cities as the centers of development. where but if you look at the rural population in India, I mean, it's the largest rural population in the world today, I think, is an Indian population. And the pace of urbanization in India is quite moderate as compared to what happened in China. So, I mean, what would you say about, having a model of development which focuses on rural areas, one, for the sake of rural development, and second, also one major problem which most of the economies which focused on technology and urban development faced is what we call as the middle income trap. And they reached at a level beyond which they were not able to come out of that trap, and we know Southeast Asian countries, the kind of economic collapse they witnessed. So, and the same happened in Soviet Union when it was not able to diversify its economy. It was over dependent upon natural resources, and that continues to remain a problem. And this problem continues in India also when we are also trying to diversify this. So, I would like to know your comments on this. Thank you.
We will take one or two more questions and then.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yes.
I took long time.
Okay. Okay.
I took long time in
No.
asking the question.
We have time. We have plenty of time. Renu, please come this side. आ गया.
Yes.
Yes. Arey, such a fascinating topic. Russia, China. And
Okay.
I think they need some time to process it.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Nicolin, for such an insightful presentation. You mentioned regarding the centralized. All right. I'm Abhilasha, pursuing Masters in International Studies from SIS. So, in your presentation, one thing that I fascinated a lot regarding the centralization of education. So, as a BRICS member, what could be the integrated approach that we should work upon regarding the development of the rural India, as the fellow mates also asked regarding as a BRICS partner, what we should try to approach, or what are the strategy towards the not only centralizing the education, because somehow it is affecting the regional education as well. So yeah, what the insight would you like to give us regarding this? Thank you.
Rahul. We can have these three questions and then.
We can have a second round with them.
Okay. I can. Yes. One more question. Yes, please.
There is one more question.
Do you have? No?
All right, we can tackle it. All right, yes.
From the topic that you had discussed today.
Hello, professors.
Yeah.
This is Aditya, research scholar from CRCAS. This is a bit different question from the topic that you discussed, but from Russian perspective, I want to understand that since there is a all-weather friendship between India and Russia, as it was already in the period of Nehru, and after that also in 1971 treaties and like that. Is there any departure from that friendship, since there was a friendship between India and Russia in which Nehru had even said that I had given blood to Russia? There is an anecdote about that. His personal secretary has written about it. So, in balancing China, as you had recently said that in your lecture that China is now acting as a older brother and Russia is behaving like a younger brother. So, is it any departure from the earlier perspective of Russia being all-weather friend of India, encountering China, encountering its hegemony in the South Asian region? Apart from that, I just want to take a pleasure in
very pertinent
informing
remark.
you that you
Is
were
there
discussing
no
about the
realization
organic.
That Russia can be, China can be a challenge for Russia in times to come. I mean, earlier, one of the grounds and bases for Indo-Soviet or India-Russia, coming together was the common threat from China. Is there no such realization now? This.
Yeah.
All
Is there
right.
any departure from Russian
a
side?
departure?
Because I just want to understand from a Russian perspective, as you are a Russian citizen, what you are thinking about this? Because it should be a crude experience from the Russian side. And
This no limits partnership. Huh? 3 years back,
since
it was a no limits partnership.
yeah,
They
many
declared-
things had changed right now, and today we can see as strategically we are on the same par. We had even thwarted United States to stand with
yes.
US.
Please.
Yes, sure. Okay, so I think we can discuss.
This one you should discuss last. First, you discuss the. Of course, one you have already answered about agriculture.
Yeah. Okay. Professor Sudhir Kumar asked, I suppose, the main strategic question about alternatives and
And
fate
depopulation,
and
rural
and, and,
depopulation.
and fate of in a whole world countryside in different countries. I mean, this demographic depopulation started first in West Europe and the United States, and after that in the territory of Russia, and now we can find some first step of the population also in India, in any cases,
in
and
more developed parts of India.
and
Yeah.
yes, and the growth real growth of the population in China. And tomorrow I will show you again the results of our field work with Brazilian colleagues, and they also mentioned this problem in Brazilian context. So some analytics suppose that yes, it's a price of progress, and it's very liberal view since the beginning of 20th century that modern progress, it's progress first of all for urban areas, for big industries, and countryside, it's typical reservation for backwardness and for disappearing at all. So it's orthodox progressive view on countryside. And again, concerning some political ideologies, in the beginning of 20th century, it was a positive view on some alternative for rural development. And in the beginning of 20th century, it was very popular, so-called ideology of agrarism. Agrarism was formulated by some conservative, romantic German professors, but also Russian Narodniks and Chayanov school. And it was idea how it's possible to develop countryside in modern context. So it was idea among some agrarists in Great Britain, for example, the idea of so-called town garden. It was idea how to diversify the development countryside and use not only agricultural branches, but, for example, local industries. And one of the great finding of Chinese reform in 1980s and especially in 1990s was the movement of construction small factories in countryside. For example, I don't know how is India, but in Russia in 1990s were very popular toys from China. Very cheap, different toys, but most of the toys were produced in these rural small factories. And these rural small factories provided toys, Chinese toys for all world. So it was a good example how it's possible to save labor power in countryside, transforming their labor activity from agriculture to local industries. Of course, this process is it's not clear, and some critics stressed that in the beginning of 21st century, most of these local factories were closed. And now it's a new opportunity for producing toys and other products. But in any case, firstly, it's of course it's diversification of the labor in countryside, not only agricultural activity. It's the same situation in Russia. I mentioned we have 25% of all rural dwellers in countryside, but only 6% they are working in agriculture, and other 19% they have some other activity. And one of the way, and for example, our West European colleagues wrote about it, about a process so-called new rurality, so-called post-agricultural rurality, to live in countryside, but to work not as a peasant, not as an agricultural worker, but for example, in some cultural industries, in some creative industries, and so on and so on. But of course, this way is possible only for very rich countries like France, for example, Sweden, Great Britain, when for a farmer transform their household for some mini hotel, when they transport their farms for tourists, and so on and so on. But in any case, we should maintain different types of social and labor activity in countryside. Unfortunately, in Russia, we can see opposite situation. So expansion of so-called agrarian monoculture, market-oriented, and the same situation, for example, in the United States. For example, in 1950s, some rural areas in the center of America, I mean the territory of so-called Great Plain, they consisted from different types of planting. So I mean apples, fruits, different variant of grain, and now it's a plain of monoculture of corn. Only corn, thousand and thousand meals, only famous American corn. As a result, also depopulation, degradation of countryside because of only one market-oriented culture. It's typical situation for many south region in Russia, for example, expansion monoculture of wheat or sunflower, or again corn, and so on. So the countryside need in different branches of economy, different variants of cultural development, and also different types of settlements. It was mentioned the process centralization of education in countryside. But first of all, for Russia, its problem, it's the centralizations of also local municipalities. So I don't know how it's India, but in Russia in 21st century, it's good fashion to centralize all is possible. For example, we have now the process of centralization of our universities. And it's sometimes 3 or 4 universities combined in one big university, so-called federal university. And from point of view central bureaucracy, it's more easy to manage with big universities than control it to manage 4 universities. But it's not good for process of education of each university. And we have so many tragedies in this process of centralization of universities. And of course, the process of centralization of municipal power on local level among so-called, from late Soviet period, it was policy centralization, this division, perspective village and non-perspective village. So perspective village had some financial support for development school, local country club, and so on. And non-perspective village didn't have this opportunity. Local school was closed. Medicine was abandoned, and so on and so on. So, but what it means is this permanent process of centralization, industries, cities, schools, universities, and so on and so on. It means also the centralization of financial resources, of budget resources. And effective local government, effective municipal local government started from ability to control your own local resources, to ability to formulate, to control your own budget, your own financial resources. For example, in Russian case, it's not possible. So in many cases, it's some tradition of center planned economy and local rural municipals doesn't have opportunity to control their own budget. They depend on a high level of so-called oblast or republic. So I think in a whole, the question devastation, depopulation of countryside, it's also the question centralization and decentralization local resources, local rural urban resources, and ability of local power, local elites to control their budget, their resources, using this for local development. And of course, it's ideology. I mentioned Chayanov's name. Chayanov wrote in the beginning of 20th century special rural agrarian utopia, how it's possible to transform city civilization of Russia into rural civilization, but with city comfort, with city culture, and so on and so on. It's very small, funny story, about 50, 70 pages, but it's a very interesting model. And the main suggestion of this utopia, how to make more attractive culture in countryside than in the city. So it's the main question. For example, we have a lot of interviews with young generation in countryside asking about their perspective in Russia, and in sometimes in agro holdings it's a deficit of young workers, young engineers, young agronomists, and so on, and many young representatives of these intellectual agrarian professions stress that they dream to move to the city because culture of city is more attractive and it's so boring life in the countryside. So it's not only economic question, political economic question, diversification of economy, political question, who controls local budgets, but it's also the key question, cultural question, how to attract people to live in countryside. I mentioned about this experiment with Eco Village, when some creative elites, IT elites prefer to live in wonderful landscape, rural landscape, and to earn a lot of money from Google, and in our technological situation, it's possible to live in countryside and to work in biggest IT company. But now it's only some examples, and I suppose in any case it's a great task for political elites, our countries, how to find this balance between rural and urban development. Now we have very disbalanced situations, the uncontrolled growth of our cities and devastating of our countryside in countries of BRICS. Thank you. So it's the first answer. Concerning centralization of education, also, I suppose that I mentioned about centralization of universities in Russia. It's a central key. It's a central key institution in countryside local rural school, and the many countries provided this policy of centralization of school. And by the way, it was also experiment of Margaret Thatcher reform. In 1970s, she closed about 1/3 of all rural schools in Great Britain. And after that, England lost about 1/4 of all rural settlement because school is closed and parents don't have perspectives what to do with their children. They prefer to migrate to a new place where this school functions. So automatically, the closed school, it means the death of local village. Unfortunately, in Russia, this process was started about 50 years ago in late Soviet period. And now we have so-called small complex rural schools. Sometimes in this school, we have only 12 children, for example, and one teacher for 2 or 3 schoolboy or schoolgirls. And in this case, of course, bureaucracy insisted we have to close the school because it's so expensive to spend money for 3 teacher and 12 schoolboy schoolgirls. We have also some experiments in our rural education. Some ideas, some attempt to save small complex schools, how to attract teachers from cities to countryside. But again, I suppose it's a complicated process, economic, political, and cultural. So if the aim of the government to develop all territories of the state, not only some central capital region, so in this case it's also the task how to transfer financial resources, economic, industrial, technological resources, and cultural resources in the countryside. And by the way, for example, supporters of this cultural development of Russia stressed that all main achievements of Russian culture and science were in Russian countryside. Alexander Pushkin wrote his poems in countryside. Leo Tolstoy wrote the War and Peace in countryside, and Mendeleev opened the system of chemical elements also in countryside when he was in the rest. So it's also countryside as some place of creativity for our labor and for our rest. Thank you. And the third question about friendship, this triangle. China, Russia, India.
Yeah.
I hope we will discuss it, especially the day after tomorrow, talking about Russian-Indian relations. But you see that relations between Russia and China were very dramatic, and sometimes we were enemies with China, sometimes we were friends. But in case of India, we were friends everywhere, every time. Sometimes more close friends, sometimes less, but we have saved our friendly relations. I discussed with one of my Russian colleagues, he is a businessman, and he discussed this question, why the trade between Russia and China is so high level, and the trade relations between India and Russia less developed. And of course, the first answer it's a geographical factor. You see the border between Russia and China. We are neighbors, and it's much easier to organize a flooding of products between Russia and China. And the main problem from this point of view, Russian businessmen, of course, the problem of logistics. So India and China doesn't have a common border, and as a result, it's so long way between products of India and Russia. But it was some cynical joke. But sometimes it's so good to have close friends without common border, because when you have common border, sometimes you have a lot of problems, like in case of China-Russian border. So I mentioned about some border conflict in our previous Chinese-Russian history. I think, of course, that Russian-Indian relation has very good perspective. I should mention about some key strategic Comintern initiative Vladimir Lenin that stressed that in the future the decisive factor of development of mankind is strategic union between Russia, China, and India, because it's the most population in that period and now concentrated among these countries and territories, and also economic, cultural, and geopolitical potential. I suppose that of course, Russia should develop our relations with India, and we have a lot of potential. And it is not dangerous for China. The development of Russian-Indian relations in modern situation, and all our three countries, the key members of BRICS Union. But I think we will discuss it later.
But we consider development of Russia-China relation as a threat to India. That's the problem. You mentioned about Port Arthur.
Yes.
I will mention Vladivostok,
Yeah.
which was founded in 1860, and in 2020, 5 years earlier, four and a half years earlier, the 150th anniversary of founding of Vladivostok was being celebrated, and there were some posts on the website of the Russian embassy in Beijing regarding this celebration. The Chinese objected, and those posts were taken out.
Mm.
So Russia-China border might have been settled, but it's believed that the Chinese have a long historical memory. They have not forgotten the areas that was taken from them by Treaty of Nanking, Treaty of Peking, and they still consider Russia's Far East as basically Chinese territory, and therefore this objection to celebration of 150th anniversary of Vladivostok. The question is whether the Russians realize this looming threat or not. I don't want you to answer now. We will take it up, but we are concerned. We believe that how could Russia not understand the long-term threat that China poses, an overpopulated China and an underpopulated Russia, and that to Russia's Far East. There are more than 10 times Chinese in the Far East on the Chinese side than on the Russian side. So in future, and I have been to Vladivostok,
Yep.
you can see Chinese businesses all over the place. Is there no realization about it? Thank you very much. We will move for tea,
Okay.
then come back, and we already have our next speaker, Professor Gulshan Sachdeva. So every day we are having at least 2 star speakers. One, you are the shining star, but there are others who are joining you.